How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to Set 6, and today we've got a couple of little bits and pieces to look at. Naoki Hamaguchi has been over here in the UK for the Golden Joystick Awards, which we'll talk about briefly. But while he's over here, he's done a series of interviews as well, talking about the future for Final Fantasy VII Remake and the project beyond. So, we might as well have a look at them, I think. You know, should we? Should we? Yeah, go on, why not? Please do like the video and subscribe for future content. It helps the channel grow and I appreciate it massively. And you know, you want to make me happy, right? So, you know, like and sub. But let's jump straight into it. So this was a series of interviews that have been done with the Daily Star, which is a newspaper over here in the UK. And I assume that this has been done while Naoki Hamaguchi is over here in the UK for the Golden Joystick Awards. And oh, ludicrous. I mean, Rebirth won 4 awards, well, it won 2, and then Code and Brianna won an award for Cloud and Aerith's performances respectively. Rebirth itself won Best Storytelling and Best Soundtrack, but it missed out on both the Console Game of the Year award, which it missed out on to Helldivers 2, and then it missed out on the Ultimate Game of the Year award to Black Myth Wukong, and I'm a little bit confused, but moving on. And what we'll move on to is the actual interviews themselves, because there's a few little interesting bits in there. And it's an interview that's broken into 3 parts. And the first part of it talks about the future of Final Fantasy VII after the remake project is completed, and a few other things like turn-based combat, stuff like that. But he opens this section of the interview talking about how they felt the need to mix it up, with Final Fantasy VII Remake being a very linear, story-driven experience. They didn't want to do the same thing again when it came to Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, because if they'd have done that, it would have just been a case of, well, FF7 Remake was like that, FF7 Rebirth was like that, so we already know what's going to happen in FF7 Re3. Like, we already know what type of game it's going to be. There's not going to be anything to surprise us. So he's saying here that it was done with a look to keeping the project fresh between games. And this is something that I had already predicted on the channel anyway. For me, it's very much the structure of a story. You know, you have your first bit where you set everything up and you've got a very story-focused aspect going on. Then you've got your middle bit where everything goes crazy and you learn about everything and you do loads of different things. And then when it comes to the third part, that's when it closes back up again and becomes a much more linear section of the story. That's what I've been expecting with the remake project since probably about halfway between Remake and Rebirth, and this is just saying to me that we are probably going to get a more story-focused, more linear game in Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 3, because you wouldn't be able to necessarily do the same thing that you've just done with Rebirth again. And he talks about this a little bit more in another section of this interview, which we will get to in a second, but yeah, this makes sense to me. He goes on to then talk about turn-based combat, and in fairness, it's what I've always expected people from Square Enix to say these days, and that is that they're more focused on the action side of things. He says that he's not got a problem with turn-based combat, he likes turn-based combat, but at the same time, they like the idea that pushing a button is immediately reflected by something on the screen, and that this is what they're looking for when they're making games. So it suggests to me that we're not going to see a turn-based Final Fantasy anytime soon, and that's quite upsetting. But you know, it's not something new. You know, we've heard this before, we know that this is the way Final Fantasy has gone, so it is what it is. He finishes off this section of the interview talking about spin-offs, and he doesn't commit to anything. Basically what he says is that he wants Part 3 of Remake to come out as quickly as possible, and then move on maybe to look at some other stories, dig a bit deeper. So there is that potential out there. And he goes on to say that there's definitely a call out there to see other spotlights on other parts of the world and the universe, different characters. So I'd like to maybe switch to looking at them in a different way after we've got the third game out. And this is the second suggestion that I've seen since the start of the remake project, that there might be more after Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 3. I believe it was Kitase possibly. I did mention it in a video ages ago, but basically what one of them said was very similar to this. We're just focused on getting the remake project out. Who knows what happens after that? So there's definitely the possibility that we will see more Final Fantasy VII universe stuff after the remake project, and that's a good thing, I think. yeah, that's probably a good thing. That's the end of this section of the interview. The next one that we're going to move on to is Hamaguchi talking about things that they would do differently in Remake Part 3. Things that are going to change from Rebirth to Part 3. And they've already kind of suggested what one of them could be, and that is maybe a more linear story, which is, like I say, something I'm expecting. But one of the things that he does focus on is talking about the people who said that there were too many minigames in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. And he says that he can see their point, but he does think that they made the right decision as far as how many games and minigames that they had in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. And he talks about how it comes down to personal taste in a lot of ways, and how people are going to prefer some minigames to others, and the more minigames that you add, the more potential for that to happen you put into the game. But he does say, looking forward to the third title, Remake Part 3, that he wouldn't do the same amount of minigames again. Which I think partially ties into the feedback, and he goes on to say that, you know, he'd look to cut it down to maybe a more manageable size and number of minigames for players. But like I say, they've already said that they're potentially going to be going back to, or he didn't say it, but he suggested that they'll be going back to a more linear, more story-driven game for Part 3. If that's the case, there's not really the room for minigames, or at least not as many minigames. So yeah, it makes sense completely that if you're going to have a more story-driven linear game, you're going to have less room for minigames. That just makes sense. And then the other thing that he says that he would change is that he would make the Platinum Trophy not as difficult. Now, I'm going to be real, I've still not done my hard mode run yet. I've saved it to do on stream, which we will be doing soon on Twitch and YouTube, so keep an eye out for that. But I've not done it yet, so I don't know how difficult the Platinum is, but I'm assuming it's quite difficult, although I know a lot of people who've got it, so maybe not? I don't know. Let me know. Have you got the Platinum? Have you picked up the Platinum for Rebirth? How difficult was it? Let me know in the comments below. And yeah, keep an eye out for that stream coming soon, because I keep having to put it off because new games come out that I end up streaming, and I just need to get back and do my hard run. So yeah, keep an eye out for that. But then we get to the final part of this interview, and this is something that I've kind of expected, and they've already said it before, so I kind of believed them when they did say it. But that is that we are not going to be getting any DLC for Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Hamaguchi says that he definitely hears the desire from the fans, the people out there that want that kind of thing, but from his perspective, what people would really want is Part 3 to come out. And I kind of agree with him. I would prefer Part 3 to come out sooner. I think we're still looking at 2.5, 3 years from now before Part 3 comes out. If you add DLC into the mix, that's when it becomes 3.5, 4 years from now. And yeah, I think we're good. I think we're good. I think we can get straight into it. I mean, any DLC that we got for Rebirth wouldn't be anything monumental, I don't think, anyway. Maybe a Vincent DLC, which would be fun, don't get me wrong, it'd be enjoyable. But yeah, I can't see it, and Hamaguchi's pretty much confirmed, well, he has confirmed it here. They've got no plans to make any DLC. They have not focused any development resources on creating extra content or any DLCs, nothing like that. So we all kind of had that feeling. We've spoke about it before on the channel, how I don't think it's going to happen. I know what I'd like to get, but yeah. They said it ages ago that the only DLC that they were planning was the Intermission DLC, purely because it was a tester for the PS5. That was pretty much the deal with the Intermission DLC. It was all about being ready for the PS5, so that Final Fantasy VII Rebirth could just go all out on PS5. But yeah, that's the interviews, that's everything. Let me know what you're thinking in the comments below about the DLC thing, about is the Platinum Trophy difficult. Let me know about all of the things. Also, we have recently become a partner with Logitech Gaming, so a massive thank you to them and a big shout out to them. Check out the link in the description of the video and that'll take you to the Logitech Gaming page so that you can check out their products and see what's going on. But we'll definitely be talking more about that in the future. So keep an eye out for that sort of stuff on the channel. But yeah, let me know what you're thinking in the comments below about these interviews. Let me know what you think about Final Fantasy VII Rebirth missing out on the Game of the Year awards at the Golden Joysticks. Does make me a little bit worried about the Game Awards. It does make me a little bit worried, although the Game Awards are voted by a panel predominantly, whereas the Golden Joysticks is completely fan voted. So, who knows? Who knows? But yeah, like the video, subscribe for future content, get involved in the comments below, but more importantly than all of that, have a great day.